welcome to our webinar. Welcome to Contino and DueDil's webinar on how to migrate our critical applications to GCP in 8 weeks. This webinar will cover a bit of an intro to Contino and DueDil as well, the challenges that DueDil was facing, both from a business perspective as well as technical perspective. And in the same way, we're going to look at the how we migrated this application in 8 weeks and what are the results. What did we benefit out of this? What were the good things and what we can take away as well out of this session? As I said, my name is Federico. I work at Contino as principal consultant. I've been with Contino for a couple of years. I specialize in cloud architectures, containers, and GCP and AWS as well. Before Contino, I was working in a company as lead site reliability engineering. With me today, we have Avinash. I know, just a brief introduction about Contino. Contino, I'm sure most people in the call will know about Contino, but Contino is a large DevOps transformation company. We've helped some of the largest companies in the world migrating to cloud, building landing zones, which really is our bread and butter, but also helping them with agile transformation as well as DevOps transformation, right? So we work at this point with enterprises and financially regulated companies. DueDil is one of them, and help them move into cloud. We work with Azure, AWS, and GCP as well, which is growing a lot these days. So you can see all the big companies we've engaged with, like we have offices in London, in the US, as well as in APAC, and we've helped global companies migrating to cloud, and we worked on some of the largest cloud migrations out there. With me, I have Avinash.
Yep, thanks a lot, Federico. Hi, everyone. Good afternoon if you're joining us from London. My name is Avinash. I work as a senior product manager at DueDil. I've been at DueDil for close to 1 year now. Next slide, Fed, if that's okay. Sorry, I'm going to annoy you by saying next slide a lot. Yeah, a little bit about DueDil. So DueDil as a business has been has been based for 9 years now. So we are an established business. Basically, our principle and our philosophy is that we want to be able to tell the story behind every SME business. And we do that by collecting a lot of information from authoritative sources around businesses, and we make it available through our easy to integrate API and very intuitive web application. We provide access to almost 50 million companies, so our core is pretty much in UK and Ireland. And we do that by working across 400 clients. We have a lot of data connections that we make between the businesses. And that's represented with almost 150 million API calls a month. And as we talk through how we did the Google migration, it will come forward as to the amount of data that we were responsible for and the amount of planning that really went into us migrating to the GCP platform. We partner with some of the world's biggest financial services, tech companies, and insurance companies. That's a bit about DueDil. Go to the next one. Yes, and as a continuation, a bit about what gives us the edge. So there's a concept that we call a DueDil Business Information Graph. So basically, this is where we're able to make the connections between the data entities around SME businesses. And as mentioned over there, something that LinkedIn does really well for businesses, Facebook did and for people, and Google did for entities. We're trying to replicate that kind of complex network of relationships between SMEs and the economy. Cool. Next one, Fed. All right. So here I would like to touch upon a little bit about what the DueDil's challenges were, what the business challenges were, and from there, Fed can take it away to try and explore into how we dealt with the challenges. All right. The first thing is, what was our vision when we thought about how we want to launch products in the market in the last few years? Our big vision was we wanted to go international. So going international was one of the biggest things on our roadmap, and that's a part of our ambitious product roadmap. And we knew that we wanted to speeden up our execution pace, and we also wanted to do it by having autonomous product teams. And for that, we also wanted to attract some top talent. So that was our vision a couple of years ago. But there were a few obstacles in our vision. Number one, we were an on-prem infrastructure. So that was quite limiting to how we wanted to satisfy our vision because it limits on our scalability, resilience, and performance, as mentioned over here. And we were not very happy with our existing SLAs, with the infrastructure that we were on. And as you can imagine, DueDil as a business has been for 9 years. So there was a lot of homegrown technical solution that had built up over time for us. So there were a lot of traditional technology stack, and we were keen to get rid of it. We were keen to move towards towards a cloud platform, but we had a few false starts, and that's when we realized that we possibly need to get a bit of support to actually take us to the next level of the migration effort. Go to next one, Fed. Right, so that's when we said, look, this is our time. We got to move to a cloud platform. We chose GCP for a number of reasons. We felt, it provides the right amount of flexibility and availability in tech stack that we were looking for. We wanted more cloud native tooling. A lot of reasons behind that. We wanted to move away from a lot of homemade custom solutions, and we also wanted to attract some of the top tech talent. And that was because we wanted to try and build more mature and autonomous technical teams and more mature product teams. And that meant for us to move towards an integrated DevOps culture rather than a DevOps being isolated units, where there's a lot of dependency, because that doesn't help product teams be autonomous in nature. So those were some of the key reasons. And of course, one standout for us was that we started paying a lot of attention to machine learning and AI, the way we started collecting the data pieces and the way we started making connection between the data pieces. So that's why Google really stood out for us, because we felt it had the right opportunity for us to use GCP's ML and AI platform. So those were some of the key reasons why we decided that's the right time for us to make the move towards Google Cloud Platform. Yeah, next one, Fed. All right, so in terms of what we decided to migrate, a few key things really stood out for us. If you go to next slide, Fed. Thank you. Right, so there were a few important components for us. So there was an API for us, and that's a public-facing API. That's the one that a lot of clients use for us. So DueDil API and DueDil web app and supporting services. But supporting services includes a list of microservices and also a list of data pipelines that were all hosted on the whole infrastructure. So these are the three core business applications which we took to Contino, and we said, look, can you guys help us move these three core applications to GCP for us? Next one. All right, so starting off with a little bit about the DueDil API. This is pretty much built on the Open API 3.0 specification. It's based on the REST. It's a REST API, so that's something that's proved quite useful and powerful for our clients. It has, as I mentioned, the business information graph. That's where a lot of connections are formed. And it was future-proof in the way we actually built the API, except it was based on the old infrastructure, and we wanted to move the entire API to new infrastructure. So that was one of the key components. Next one. Cool. And the next one was a web app. This is a bit of a preview in the web app, and this is where clients can go in and they can select the businesses they're interested in and get some information from there. Yeah. Cool. So now I'll pass it on to Fed to basically talk through, how did we take these critical business applications from our existing infrastructure to GCP and actually finish the project in 8 weeks. On to you, Fed.
Yeah. Thank you, Avinash. So let's enter a bit of the discussion on how we technically migrated those applications to GCP. So when we were first engaged as Contino and we knew we would have to do a migration, we brought in all our experience, right? DueDil was a client in which some work has already been done in terms of assessing the application landscape and deciding what could have been moved and then migrating. So some of the work had been done for us by DueDil for sure, but nonetheless, when approaching a client and having to deal with the migration, is important to kind of like map and assess what is available to understand dependencies, to understand exactly what an application depends on, what is connected to, and how we can effectively make sure that we're migrating not only application, but all its dependencies. And after the migration phase, what we do is that we usually have an hypercare period. It's a period of time in which we have eyes on glass, monitoring the application, and we make sure that all the performances are done correctly, right? So There are a bit of different types of migration. At Contino, I've personally worked and the company has worked on a number of different migrations. In certain cases, what you do is that you work on large scale migration, mass migration. We're gonna exit 5 data centers. We're gonna migrate all those applications to GCP, to a cloud provider, right? When we do that, when we have a large scale migration, we build a migration factory. So what we do is that we start discovering the landscape, assessing the portfolio, and then we start mapping dependencies and building a way of migrating things, right? In a way that is standardized and helps us going, replicating the same effort for multiple VMs in that case. DueDil had nothing of this. DueDil has instead very complex application with a lot of dependencies that effectively are core business for the company, so very high availability requirements and complex application. This is an application that has 3 different database technologies that is using SQL and NoSQL as significant volumes of data, so in the terabytes of data, as significant SLAs agreed by DueDil with the clients. So this is a high scale, high throughput, and high availability application. Effectively, in this case, you cannot do your migration factory, but you have to white glove, effectively take this application towards a journey and change the application with you, right? Taking the application with you. So you have to, all we did effectively was taking the application and spending some time at the beginning, checking exactly what these applications are, what are the dependencies, and then selecting the appropriate way. Step one, let's see what we did. So step one, we went to go to DueDil and said, how is your GCP posture today? So if there's one thing that I've learned doing a lot of migrations, even at larger scale with perhaps even larger enterprise, global data centers, one thing I've learned is that your operating model needs to be in place before you assess the migration. We see a lot of companies that effectively are on premises, they go to cloud and they want to go to cloud and then build the operating model in the cloud by migrating all this application. In my experience, this really is a bad practice. The right thing to do is to make sure that your operating model in the cloud is running correctly. You have the things you want to have in place in a way that then when you do the migration, this is supported and your migration is succeeds, right? Because it's built upon some foundations. So we went to DueDil and we assessed the cloud foundations of the company. We looked at 4 pillars, the traditional 4 pillars that come from the CIS benchmark and our experience as well. So we looked at identity first. We made sure that DueDil had the right security posture. DueDil already had a GCP presence, but not developed one. They haven't been on GCP for years. They had something there, but it was a matter of if you want putting some security controls, some network controls around that, and identity as well. So we looked at this. We looked at what DueDil was doing, where it was, and we helped them establishing policies, increasing the security posture, right? Making sure that billing and monitoring is set up in place, making sure that we have the right firewalls as well, right? So this was like a number of concerns we have to go through. DueDil as well is a ISO company, ISO certified company. So we had to maintain the same level in GCP as well. So we had to go through the infos with the InfoSec team and making sure that everything we've done was done correctly and successfully. So we establish the cloud foundation, and then we have to look at the way in which we're going to migrate those applications. So there are in migration strategy, there are the traditional 6 R's, right? I'm sure that a lot of the people in the call will be familiar with it, but the idea is effectively whether given an application that needs to migrate and move to cloud, how are we gonna migrate this? Are we gonna lift and shift? Are we gonna rehost or replatform the application? Or are we gonna refactor the application? In this case, given the nature of the application we were working with and some of the business outcome that DueDil wanted to get, there was not a chance for us to simply rehost, right? We had to refactor the application. We had to refactor the application, and we wanted to take the opportunity of moving this application to a better place, a bit of a better place as well, to them to be more autonomous, to be to get some of the benefits of the cloud, rather just moving lift and shift. And we will see throughout the presentation that when you start making that choice, when you start saying, I want to invest into refactoring the application, at that point in time, you start getting all the benefits of the cloud. It's just immediate. A lot of companies will do a migration lift and shift and then realize that they haven't really captured all the benefits they would have wanted to capture. But when you do a re-architecture, when you do a refactor, yeah, it's a bit of bigger work. There's a bit of effort to put there, but the benefits are clear, right? From a technical stack, let's look at the technical stack a bit. On what we did, we decided to focus on GKE. So the applications were running on premises in an orchestrator called Mesos and Marathon, which people will be familiar with. DueDil has a bit of a customization of this orchestrator as well. We decided to go onto Kubernetes, onto the standard platform as well, and to repackage this application into containers, right? So what effectively we try to do is to implement what is called the GitOps model. It's a bit of a technical idea, but the idea is to have everything described as infrastructure as code. Both are infrastructure, but also our application code. All the applications that are deployed and that are running into the Kubernetes clusters of DueDil at any point in time are described in YAML file. Nothing is done manually. Everything is automated through pipelines that both build the artifacts as well as deploy the artifacts. This is not only infrastructure as code, but it's also compliance as code. We enable auditing functions, security functions to see exactly what is happening at any point in time, done by which person in the cloud. And we did that, so we use Kubernetes Engine. In the same way, I think it's interesting to also highlight the fact that in certain cases, for some use cases, we could not use Kubernetes. This is down to the logic on which the applications were built. So we could not use Kubernetes. And we use these standard VMs. We use the compute engine VMs, right? So this is interesting because it means that all these VMs are still long-lived. They have operating systems that we have to look after and everything. Even on those VMs, we deploy with some of the cloud native tools that you have there, right? With Terraform, we can deploy a VM, and we can also install software on the VM at runtime, which is really good, and is a very good posture if you want to be for the company. So let's look at the application a bit more, and let's look at the first one, which is our DueDil API. So DueDil API, as Avinash mentioned, is this API that DueDil uses, serves to its customer. SLAs are agreed. This is a very high throughput, highly technical and complex application, right? A lot of dependencies there. The application is not a recent application. It's an application that has been core of DueDil since the foundation of the company, right? So this has been ongoing for a very long time. So we replatformed the application from Mesos and Marathon to Google Kubernetes Engine. And we maintained some of the deployment requirements that DueDil had, right? DueDil had a blue-green deployment logic, which is common in a lot of banks, you will see as well. So we maintained that logic by transferring the way in which we were doing it, moving it from a custom stack that DueDil had into a standard deployment with Helm and GKE. We improved our security stack significantly, right? Because I cannot enter details, obviously, but we have significant level of protections, and we have defense in depth right now that protects the application from a lot of threats, right? So you see that with GCP, you get the benefits of deploying using what is called the GFEs, so the Google front ends. So the way in which it works is that rather differently from AWS and Azure, in which effectively they give you a load balancer. This is your load balancer. With GCP, you can deploy using global load balancer. You can deploy using Cloud Armor, DDoS protection services that are deployed on the same infrastructure on which Google runs, right? So you get all the benefits of Google networking, or Google protections, or Google anti-spoofing, all these benefits that you get, and you increase your security posture. As I said, this was a bit of a white glove migration, so we had to run load tests and stress testing of the system throughout this. We changed the monitoring stack and removed and upgraded this very large Elasticsearch instances. As I mentioned, this was a significant migration in terms of complexity. These are Elasticsearch instances that have terabytes, right? That are very, very big. So we had to coordinate this across a number of teams. We involved both the data team, data ops team, as well as the product and infrastructure team. So this was really a coordinated effort of the entire company for a little period of time, in a way that we could just like push this forward and get the benefit we wanted to get, right? DueDil was really time constrained. We had 8 weeks to do this. So we had to push this forward, and we were able to get the support at the back end of the entire company. What was the impact? We move off the mainframe, we move off, on premises, we go to GCP. So what do we do? What is the migration impact? Well, look at the numbers, right? Look at the numbers here. So we get significant performance improvements. So if you see this, these are the some of the numbers that we managed to get out of this, and it's very interesting to see. You can see that the impact was massive. We have increased availability. We have 50% improvement in certain API calls, right? We have increased security, scalability. We have a 70% increase in deployment successful, because what it means that obviously if you're moving from a customized stack that deploys your code into a standardized stack that now is just recognized by all the engineers there and everybody knows how it works, your deployments will be more stable. Everybody will know how they work, right? And we also increase development velocity because we have now standardized the stack. We now have a clear path to production, clear path to run to live. So this is very good for DueDil because DueDil can benefit on this not only on a technical perspective but also on terms of development velocity. And I think this is the graph that you see here clearly is, I think, is the core of the work that we're doing, right? So refactoring the application instead of simply rehosting enable this graph, changing some of the dependencies, upgrading the version of Elasticsearch, tuning some of the queries, doing this kind of performance optimization that we did over the week of hypercare that we had. That was really good because it enabled significant improvement in performances, which converted into satisfaction for the client, right? So clients are much happier now using DueDil's API because their responses are much faster. DueDil's availability as well has gone significantly higher. This because we made a decision of refactoring rather than simply rehosting. And after the site as well, we moved to after the API, we moved to DueDil WebApp. So DueDil WebApp is core of what DueDil has been since the beginning of the company. Significant complexity as well, like a lot of customization of this application. This was effectively white glove from on-prem to GKE. We maintain some of the blue-green deployment logic as well. We maintain some of the requirements they had for ISO compliance in this deployment pipeline. And in this case, we have to be very, very careful, right? So the API is, we have to be careful, but the web app as well, super, super careful. So in this case, as I mentioned, we didn't just create a plan to migrate the web app. We actually tested the plan multiple times. And we also went with creating multiple contingency plans. So like we had side up, side down, what is going to happen if we do this? What is going to happen if we do that? Do we have a rollback procedures? Yes, we do. In fact, we had 2 different rollback procedures depending on the time in which the failure would have occurred during our process. We really wanted to maintain the highest possible level of availability for the clients, right? For the customers, which is super important. As part of this as well, some of the benefits that we get is that whether on premises, you need to run your databases in your own stack if you want, on premises. When you move to GCP and to most other cloud providers, in GCP you have Cloud SQL. GCP will run your databases for you. Cloud SQL, you can deploy Postgres, MySQL, SQL Server now as well. In our case, we moved Postgres and MySQL to Cloud SQL, and we could get significant performance improvements as well. One of the things that I found very interesting is the fact that I remember that on premises, DueDil was running some of these databases really next to their capacity, and they were a bit concerned about what is going to happen because we get more and more users every time, and we're hitting capacity. So on the bright side, when you move into GCP, when you move into Cloud SQL, now vertically scaling your application can go up really, really quickly. So let's take a look at this migration steps, right? So because I think it's interesting for everybody to appreciate a bit of how a complex application migration actually happens. So we have, in this case, we have the user coming to a load balancer and the load balancer hitting the on-premises site instances. Each, the web app, the site effectively was deployed across 3 different instances in the same data center backed by different databases. So at the beginning, before the migration and everything, a user would go to the load balancer on premises, access the site, and connect databases. First step for us was to effectively replicate the work that we've done and replicating this work into site instances 1, 2, and 3, and 4 and 5. So we're moving to GCP. We're creating a VPN that connects our own premises to GCP and replicating the site. We're testing the site, we're testing the deployment, and we have a version of the site in GCP running, backed by the databases running on premises. This in GCP right now is not serving any traffic. We're just replicating the code, and the code is there, it's running, we can test it, it's fine, and it's running with databases on premises. So what do we do? Now it's time for us to get real, right? So we use DNS-based load balancing and we send 99% to the traffic still on premises and 0.01% to GCP. The way in which we do this load balancing is through DNS load balancing. This is where also interesting the fact that DueDil was using very well-known DDoS protection service called Cloudflare that was protecting that, and we had to take this into account as well, right? We don't stop DDoS protection just because we do a migration. We want to continue with this, having this in place. So we start serving 0.1% of traffic through GCP, and the site instances are still backed by the databases on premises, which is really interesting. We know that the 0.1% will have a small performance hit, right? Because now it has to transit the VPN. But we did the math, and the performance hit was below 10 milliseconds. So we said, okay, it's fine. We're good with this. We can continue. We can increase complexity. So what do? Well, fine. Now we start switching things a bit. We start replicating our databases onto Cloud SQL, and now site instance 4, site instance 5 use Cloud SQL, and we have 50% of traffic, a bit here, a bit there, until at the very end, it's time for us to go to 100%. So we stop serving traffic from on-premises. When we stop serving traffic from on-premises, one thing happens. So we have to keep databases in sync. The way in which we do it is by putting a maintenance page. This is the time in which we all felt pressure, right? This is the time in which what is going to happen next? What is going to go? And we had to stop for a few minutes only on a Sunday. I think, if I remember this correctly, we were all in the office, all looking at this. We stopped the website, we put a maintenance page, and we say, we're going to be back soon. We start the synchronization processes, and luckily, things go well because we tested before. So now where we are now? Well, we have 100% of the traffic being served through GCP, being backed by Cloud SQL, and we have on-premises still up there, still good, still potentially working, and we change the configuration of on-premises to now use Cloud SQL. So we have two different versions running, 100% of GCP, all our tests are successful, everything is fine. The developers that we have said, yes, we're good, we're fine, we can move forward with this. And we still have a copy on premises, but it's just there for safety. Our safety net is still on premises. So this is really good. And you can see here that we start getting benefits, right? So now is auto scaling. Now we have GKE, so I can do my things, and I can exactly tune over the next few weeks how many applications, how much memory, how much CPU, and with this I get amazing results. Look at this number. This comes from New Relic. This is really, really good because it means that we went down, like, I guess, more than 50% on certain API calls, right? And I want to stress the business impact of this, right? Like, all the statistics say that the performance of the website has a material impact on user churn. This is super important. It's the whole history of web performance of the past 5 to 10 years. We significantly increased the performances of the site on this migration, right? Which meant that the users were way more willing to stay on the site because the site was more responsive, the site was faster, the web app was responding as they wanted to be, right? And we also got some feedback from some users that said, this feels much better, way faster, thank you very much. And this was really good. I think from a business value impact, I think this was the highest result that we got. The performance impact at a direct, the performance improvement at a direct impact on the churn of the user, on the time the user was spending on the mobile application. This says the value of refactoring an application rather than just doing a simple lift and shift. As part of our engagement, obviously at Contino, we're not only trying to help the client doing some migration and then leaving, right? We did a lot of workshop, we did a lot of work with the engineering team in a way that they could take this forward. And they have, like, really, I have to say this, it's been really good because we all had a strong engagement. A lot of people came. A lot of people at the end of the weeks of the engagement were upskilled. They knew about GCP. They were willing to try things, willing to go. And it was really if you want, a blend of duties and continuous engineering cultures, right? It was very interesting. We tried a lot of different workshops as well. Some of those workshops were targeted at the data team, other workshops at the infrastructure, something for the security team as well. We all work together to deliver value and to go places together. And you can see here as well that this is small numbers that we have here. So in terms of the impact of the infrastructure code that we did, over the months of the engagement that we had on DueDil, we really tried to push the agenda on infrastructure as code forward, and we were able to contribute significantly to source code in a way that me and Yaroslav, the other engineer on the engagement, we quickly became some of the top contributors towards some of DueDil repositories, right? Which shows how much work we put there, and we built on top of what it was there. So really, really good, and I'm happy about this because I feel that the work that we've done has been left in safe hands. So I'm gonna hand this over back to Avinash for some of the business outcome of the migration.
Yeah, perfect. Thanks a lot, Fed. Yeah, I just wanted to take some time to recap, some of the business outcomes really came after the effect of the GCP migration that we did. So first things first, we asked ourselves, did we hit our business goals for 2020? And if you remember, I mentioned off that we had a really ambitious roadmap to begin with. So basically, at this moment, we are very happy where we are. Starting off with the fact that we feel now we have the infrastructure and the necessary skills to hit our ambitious growth plans and ambitious roadmap as well. Going back to some of the topics that Fed touched upon, our core service now is much more resilient, it's much more reliable. There's a lot more dependency, and we are sleeping better at night, if that's a factor at all. In terms of getting the speed, the deployment time, that's one metric that we've been able to capture, is that now we've been able to reduce that from days to 30 minutes in most cases. That would have been a very distant dream at one point of time, but it's really helped us get to that point. And the last point over here is that one of the main reasons we wanted to do that is to get ready to go international. So one good news is that because of the great work done on migrating, now we have really been able to move really fast since then. And we're looking forward to launching to our first new international country, France, within the next 1 month. As I mentioned, DueDil has been a very strong business in UK and Ireland, and that's why going into a European country is a big step for us, and all of that has come from our confidence in getting our infrastructure to a level. And once we launch in France, we're looking at more major European economies as well. Yeah, next one. Yeah, cool. So and the next question we asked us in terms of measuring the business outcome is how has the cloud really enabled us? So two things really stood out for us. The first thing was a cloud native tooling. As Fed touched upon, we have much more sophisticated monitoring and observability on our data side and on our services more than we had before. So we've had better usage of the analytics and monitoring systems because of moving to the cloud. And the other one, of course, which can be quite intangible, but something really drives product organizations, is a more mature technical organization. That means now we have a much more, built up in-house cloud native skills, and we have training materials, as Fed touched upon. Contino did a fantastic job in not only training us, upskilling us for the migration work that went on, but also helping us build a better DevOps infrastructure and to basically start, getting us to question some of the things that we probably hadn't questioned ourselves for years before that. So yeah, that's the other thing that really stood out for us. Next one, Fed. Yes. Yeah, how did Contino really help us? Again, that was the other question we asked ourselves as a part of the measuring of the business outcome. So first things first, we got over some early false starts. Again, the whole the whole project of moving to Google was not a new project for us. We have tried that in the past. DueDil has tried that in the past, but never really worked for us. There were a lot of reasons for that. One of the main reasons being, that there was always this isolated team that was trying to do it as opposed to making it more integrated. And always BAU. I think BAU is sometimes can be the biggest killer in terms of moving things across properly, because there's not really good dedication and focus to it. So unless you have to do it, sometimes you might drag your feet for too long. But that's probably one of the biggest lessons we learned in terms of how we can bring in focus, and that's where Contino really helped. But also in terms of bringing in the deep expertise and skills in cloud and DevOps, because we've always had really talented engineers, but not all of them had the same amount of skills and expertise in this focus area that we wanted. So Contino was really able to come in and you really hit the ground running from day one. One thing that's probably not always visible in such kind of engagements is the amount of pre-work that goes in. So I still remember, very deep, involved conversations even before we said yes to each other. Even before, Google, even before DueDil signed the dotted line, and even before Contino said, "Hey, these are the guys who'll be working with you." There was a lot of work gone into, scoping out the exact project even before we got started. So I think that's something that gave us a lot of confidence that, hey, it's in the right hands at the moment. There was a lot of culture. Culture is a massive part when you talk about having more, autonomous product teams. So at the moment, we're feeling really confident that it actually helped us. It inspired us towards a better cultural shift, towards a more mature and independent engineering organization. And the last thing, of course, is, that's the reason I'm on the call, and that's the reason we are still in touch, is because Contino always went the extra mile to make sure we had the skills, we had the knowledge, but also looking ahead for us, being proactive in taking the next steps, and also helping us, balance some of the short-term impact versus some of the long-term benefits that we'll get. Because I've been involved in many projects where we have got an external party to come in. More often than not, the balance is not right. Sometimes they favor the short-term wins too much, but that's not, what Contino does. There's a very good balance between, having mature conversations. Look, we can do this in the short term, but maybe this will not benefit you in the long term. So that's when we had like a trust that had really built up between the two teams. Cool. Next one, Fed. All right, so I'll before I pass it over to Fed for the key learnings, I would like to say that, and something the Fed might touch upon is also the fact that we once the previous engagement ended, we actually went back and we started talking again. And the good thing is Contino is working with us again at the moment. So that was a break between different engagements, but that's the reason because of the success of the previous one, it gave us a confidence to really engage them for another project as well to continue the work. Yeah, that's from my point. Now I'll pass it over to you, Fed, to take us home.
Thank you, Avinash. Thank you for the kind words as well, the work that we've done. So what did we learn? What did we learn out of this? And I think what can you take as well for all the audience out of the effort that we did here? So I think there is a few things to keep in mind when you're doing this. Like the most interesting thing, the most important thing for me is to decide when you want to refactor, when you want to lift and shift. This is the big thing. If you want to get the significant business value, the biggest business gains that DueDil got, you definitely want to go for refactoring, re-architecting, replatforming, doing some work on the application that gives you the ability of going the extra mile to get in the benefits that GKE will give you, right? That the cloud will give you, the scalability, the elasticity, all these benefits need to come when you're doing the right assessment, right planning, you're choosing the right way of refactor the application. Very important as well to define an operating model before starting any migration work. This I personally saw in a number of companies where, unfortunately, companies try to go to cloud and bundle a few things. They bundle the migration as well as the refactoring, as well as the operating model, as well as the landing zone. And then there's like too many things on the plate and so many dependencies that moving things forward is very, very hard. So from my perspective, this is also why we spend time before doing the migration itself to spend some time assessing and helping and redoing some of the work that you did on GCP platform to make it sustainable for work. This was the key thing. So defining the operating model, defining the platform itself, the infrastructure sustaining the platform, that's super important. And looking at the business value in terms of migration, because you see a lot of companies will do a TCO analysis and they will say migration was is not worth it, but they don't take into account the business value. They don't take into account the fact that you're going to reduce user churn if you go to cloud. You're not going to take into account the fact that by virtue of increasing our availability, we can offer an SLA now that we're in cloud that our competitors cannot offer. We can now compete with fintech because we're in cloud, right? All these kind of benefits are very important as well. And you get them, especially if you start using some of the higher level services, some of the managed services. We see in a lot of companies that the adoption of VM is still persistent, is still very large. My perception is that at least 80% of those companies we see, they have some form of VM. DueDil said, let's just try to minimize this. Let's choose managed services first in a way that we can maximize the business value. We can reduce the operational complexity, the operational maintenance, the cost of running our infrastructure, which is not a core differentiator for us. Core differentiator for DueDil is the data we give to our customers. The way in which we run our database, it doesn't matter as long as database really works very well for us. This is what we are here. And the last point is to consider partners, because some of the work that we've done with Google Contino had access to Google funds, right? That we're able to use support to do this migration onto GCP, which is something that you can get when you're engaging with partners as well. Next steps for us really was, as Avinash hinted to start migrating something else now. So we moved from this critical and core application that were effectively white glue to cloud into migrating a lot of smaller applications with smaller availability requirements that can then now be effectively migrated as a factory, a bit of a factory migration for them, and migrating them onto GCP, being much faster at this delivery as well. So we're migrating other things, right? We're trying to unlock faster and deeper views into this data set. Some of the queries that we can run now in the cloud were just simply not possible on premises. It was too complex to update the database to support more advanced queries, more advanced access patterns that now are available in cloud because we had the hardware support to upgrade databases that then benefit our customers in a way that DueDil had core differentiators with companies because it can run more complex queries that come from the fact that he has an infrastructure agile enough to support these advanced use cases. So this closes our webinar. I have some time to take some question. If there is any, feel free to use the webinar, GoToWebinar questions panel that you have here for question. Absolutely. In the meantime, I know that I saw some of the questions that were coming as well through this. So I think that one question that I think was interesting is the Cloud SQL versus RDS. So how does Cloud SQL compares to RDS? I think a Cloud SQL compares to RDS. So what are the differences? Cloud SQL is Google's database migration system, if you want, database management system, and RDS is AWS ones, right? So how do they compare? GCP as a Cloud SQL, they're very similar in nature, those services. I would argue that AWS one covers more databases, so it supports Oracle as well, whether GCP doesn't. But at the same time, GCP is a bit more flexible in the way in which you're interfacing these databases, and it has something called Cloud SQL Proxy that enables you to connect these databases with SSL without having to perform too many changes as well. And this is for Cloud SQL versus RDS. If there are other questions, we can take them now through GoToWebinar. If there are no questions, I think perhaps it's good for us to close the webinar here. I think that will be it. Yes, okay, I don't see any question coming. Anyway, as I said, if there's any question, feel free to reach out to me or to reach out to Contino's marketing team, anybody. We'll be more than happy to talk about GCP migrations. And thank you for coming today to our webinar. Thank you.